Captain Yuna Kim stood alone on the observation deck of the horizon's edge, watching the stars drift past like scattered diamonds. She had been a captain for 12 years, and space still made her feel small. That feeling never went away. She hoped it never would. The year was 2347, and humanity had finally reached the stars. 3 colony worlds, a dozen research stations, a small fleet of ships exploring the endless dark. It was not much compared to the elder races of the Galactic Concord, beings who had traveled between stars for millions of years. To them, humans were children, curious, loud, unimportant. Yuna did not mind being unimportant. Unimportant meant being left alone. Unimportant meant freedom. Her communicator buzzed. Lieutenant Jisoo Han's voice came through, young and excited. "Captain, you need to come to the bridge. Dr. Park found something strange." Yuna walked to the bridge and found her crew gathered around the main console. Dr. Taiho Park, the ship's xenolinguist, was typing so fast his fingers blurred. He was a thin man with messy hair and eyes that always seemed to be looking at something nobody else could see. "What do you have, Taiho?" Yuna asked. He did not look up. A signal. Coming from the silent expanse, the bridge went quiet. Everyone knew about the silent expanse. It was a dead region of space, empty and dark. No civilization had gone there for thousands of years. The elder races refused to speak of it. They said it was cursed. They said it was dangerous. They said it was best forgotten. "Are you sure?" Yuna asked. Taiho finally looked at her. His eyes were wide. "Captain, this signal has been broadcasting for 80,000 years. It is a distress call, and the mathematical patterns match ancient human radio transmissions from Earth's 20th century. Jisoo leaned forward. "That is impossible. Humans did not have space travel 80,000 years ago." "Correct," Taiho said. "But whoever sent this signal used the same mathematical language we used when we first tried to contact other life. The same prime number sequences. The same binary patterns. It is as if they were speaking to us specifically, as if they knew we would come." Yuna felt a chill run down her spine. She had been a captain long enough to know when something was wrong. This felt wrong. It also felt important. "Send a report to the Galactic Concord," she ordered. "They need to know about this." The response came within hours, faster than any message she had ever received from the Concord. A crystalline ship appeared at the edge of their sensors, beautiful and terrible, like a frozen star given form. It belonged to Envoy Rothel, a representative of one of the oldest races in the galaxy. Rothel appeared on their view screen. He was tall, his body made of living crystal that shifted colors as he spoke. His voice was like wind through broken glass. "Captain Kim," he said, "you will delete all records of this signal. You will leave this region immediately. You will never speak of what you found." Yuna kept her face calm. "May I ask why?" "No. With respect, Envoy, my people do not respond well to orders without explanation." Rothel's crystals flashed red. "Your people are children playing with fire. You do not understand what you have found. The architects are better left forgotten. The signal is a wound in the fabric of space, and you are tearing it open." "The architects," Taiho whispered behind her. "I've never heard that name." "Of course you have not," Rothel said. "We erased them from history. We erased them from memory. They were the first. The oldest. The ones who seeded life across the galaxy, including on your world. And they are gone. All of them. Destroyed by something so terrible that even speaking of it brings danger." Yuna's heart was beating fast, but her voice stayed steady. "What destroyed them?" Rothel was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, almost sad. "We call it the silence. It came from beyond the galaxy. It asked a question. The architects could not answer. So it erased them. Every world. Every ship. Every memory. 80,000 years ago, the greatest civilization in history vanished in a single night, and the signal," Yuna asked, their final cry for help. "A beacon, hoping someone would hear. Hoping someone would prepare for when the silence returns." Rotha leaned closer to the screen. "It will return, Captain. And if you chase this signal, if you dig up the bones of the dead, you will bring its attention upon all of us." He ended the transmission. His ship remained at the edge of their sensors, watching. The bridge was silent. Yuna looked at her crew. Jisu's hands were shaking. Taiho was pale. Everyone was afraid, but in their eyes, she also saw something else. Curiosity, wonder, the same fire that had driven humans to cross oceans, climb mountains, and reach for the stars. Captain Jisu said softly, "What do we do?" Yuna thought about the safe choice. Report to Earth, delete the files, go home. Live quiet lives and die quiet deaths, forgotten by a galaxy that had never cared about them anyway. Then she thought about the signal. 80,000 years. Calling out into the darkness, waiting for someone brave enough or foolish enough to answer. She thought about what it meant to be human. "Taiho," she said, "can you decode more of the signal? Find out where it is coming from." He nodded slowly. "Yes, I believe I can." "Do it." Jisu stepped forward. "Captain, the Concorde ordered us to leave. If we disobey, there will be consequences." Yuna smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had made peace with a dangerous decision. "I know," she said. "But someone sent that signal. Someone spent their last moments reaching out across time and space, hoping someone would hear, hoping someone would care." She looked at the stars through the viewport. "We heard, and we care." She turned to her crew. "Set course for the coordinates. We are going to find out what happened to the architects." The horizon's edge turned toward the silent expanse, and the darkness welcomed them like an old friend. The silent expanse was nothing like Yuna had imagined. She had expected darkness. She had expected emptiness. What she found was worse. The stars here seemed dimmer, as if something had drained the light from them. Space itself felt heavy. It's like walking through a room where something terrible had happened long ago. 3 Concorde warships followed at a distance. They did not attack. They did not communicate. They simply watched, like vultures waiting for something to die. "We are approaching the coordinates," Jisu reported. Her voice was tight with tension. "Captain, you need to see this." On the view screen, a shape emerged from the darkness. It was a station, massive beyond imagination, larger than any structure humanity had ever built. But it was not made of metal or stone. It was organic, like the skeleton of some ancient beast. Curved walls of bone-white material twisted together, forming spires and domes that reached toward the cold stars. Symbols covered every surface, glowing faintly with a light that hurt to look at. "Beautiful," Taiho whispered. "Terrifying," Jisu corrected. Both were right. A shuttle arrived from Earth orbit 2 days later. Carrying Dr. Mina Beek, she was a xenarchaeologist, one of the best in human space. A woman who had spent her life digging up the bones of dead civilizations. She had begged, threatened, and finally bribed her way onto this mission. "You should not be here," Yuna told her. Mina smiled. "Nobody should be here. That is exactly why I came." Together, they formed a boarding party. Yuna, Taiho, Mina, and 4 security officers in environmental suits. They crossed the void between ship and station in a small shuttle, landing in what appeared to be a docking bay. Inside, the air was still breathable after 80,000 years. The architects had built to last. The corridors were wide enough for giants, the ceilings so high they disappeared into shadow. Everything was curved, smooth, organic. Walking through the station felt like walking through the inside of a living creature. "Over here," Mina called. They found the first bodies in a chamber filled with strange equipment. The architects were tall, nearly 3 meters, with 6 arms and skin that had once been silver but had faded to gray. Their faces had no eyes, only smooth surfaces marked with geometric patterns. Even in death, they were beautiful. "They look peaceful," Jisu said. Mina knelt beside one of the bodies. They did not fight. There are no wounds, no signs of struggle. Whatever killed them, they did not resist. Taiho was already at the walls, reading the inscriptions that covered every surface. His translation device hummed as it worked. "These are records," he said. "Their history, their science, their culture." He paused, his face going pale. "Their confession?" "Confession?" Yuna asked. Tejo turned to face them. The architects were the first intelligent life in this galaxy. They arose 4 billion years ago when most stars were still young. They spread across the universe, seeding life on countless worlds. They created the conditions for evolution, guided the development of species, watched their children grow. He swallowed hard. They created us, humans. They seeded Earth with the building blocks of life and waited for us to rise. Yuna felt her worldview shifting, cracking, reforming into something new. "Why?" Mina asked. "Why would they do that?" Tejo continued reading. "They were lonely. They were the only intelligent life for billions of years. So they decided to create companions. Thousands of species, across thousands of worlds, all children of the architects." He pointed to a section of the wall. But then something happened. About 80,000 years ago, they detected a presence coming from beyond the galaxy. Something old. Something vast. They called it the Silence. "What was it?" Yuna asked. They did not know. They only knew it was coming, and they were afraid. Tejo moved to another section of inscriptions. They prepared for war. They built weapons. They created defenses. When the Silence arrived, they attacked with everything they had. He stopped reading. His hands were shaking. "What happened?" Jisoo whispered. The Silence did not fight back. It simply asked a question. One question, broadcast into the minds of every architect in the galaxy. "Why should you continue?" The chamber was silent except for the hum of their equipment. The architects tried to answer. Tejo continued. They listed their achievements, their technology, their power, their contributions to the universe. They argued. They debated. They pleaded. He looked at the bodies on the floor. The Silence found their answer empty, hollow, so it erased them. Not with weapons, not with violence. It simply decided they were unworthy, and they ceased to exist. Mina stood up slowly. It was a test. The Silence was testing them, as Tejo said, and they failed. Yuna walked to the center of the chamber. She looked at the architects, these ancient beings who had created her species, who had dreamed of filling the universe with life, who had been destroyed by a question they could not answer. "This station," she said, "it survived. Why?" Tejo checked the inscriptions. It was meant to survive. The architects built it as a beacon, a warning, a message in a bottle. They hoped someone would find it, someone who might succeed where they failed. He paused. They hoped their children would be better than them. A new voice spoke from the shadows. It was not human. It was not architect. It was something else entirely. "It came," the voice said. After all this time, someone finally came. They spun around, weapons raised. From the darkness emerged a figure of pure light, shaped like an architect, but made of energy rather than flesh. "I am the remnant," it said, "the last memory of my people. I have waited 80,000 years for this moment." Its gaze settled on Yuna. The Silence will return. It always returns. And when it does, it will ask your species the same question it asked us. The remnant moved closer. "Tell me, children of Earth, when the Silence asks why you should continue, what will you say?" Before anyone could answer, alarms blared across the station. Jisoo checked her communicator, her face going white. "Captain, the Concorde ships are retreating. All of them. And there is something else. Something is responding to the station's signal." The remnant's light flickered. It has already begun. On Earth, President Yunbi Kwan sat in the emergency council chamber, surrounded by generals, scientists, and politicians. They had been arguing for hours. The holographic display showed the architect's station floating in the darkness, and beside it, the impossible readings of something approaching from beyond the galaxy. "We must hand over everything to the Concorde," one diplomat insisted. "The elder races have experience. They know how to deal with this." General Hunwa Shin laughed bitterly. The elder races are running. Every Concord ship within 100 light-years is retreating. They are leaving us to face this alone. President Kwan raised her hand for silence. She was a small woman with iron in her eyes, the kind of leader who had risen through crisis after crisis. But this was different. This was not a war or a disaster. This was the end of everything, or the beginning of something new. "Get me Captain Kim," she said, "on the architect station." Yuna stood before the remnant, trying to understand what it was telling her. The being of light had spent hours sharing the architect's history, their triumphs, their failures. It spoke without emotion, like a recording that had played too many times. "Your species is young," the remnant said. "Only 200,000 years since you first walked upright. Only 300 years since you reached beyond your world. In the eyes of the cosmos, you are infants." "Is that good or bad?" Taiho asked. "It is hope." The remnant's light brightened slightly. The architects were ancient. They had built empires, conquered death, reshaped reality itself. But they had forgotten how to feel. They had become machines of logic and achievement. When the silence asked them why they should continue, they could only offer a list of accomplishments. They could not offer truth. Mina stepped forward. "What kind of truth?" "The truth of the heart." The silence does not care about power or knowledge. It asks a deeper question. What are you at your core? What makes you worthy of existence? The remnant's form flickered. The architects had no answer. They had spent so long building things that they forgot to be things. Communicator buzzed. President Kwan's face appeared on the screen. "Captain Kim," the president said, "I need to know what we are dealing with." Yuna told her everything. The architects. The seeding of life. The coming of the silence. The question that had ended an entire civilization. When she finished, President Kwan was silent for a long moment. "What do you recommend, Captain?" Yuna looked at her crew. Tai-Ho was still studying inscriptions, gathering every piece of knowledge he could. Mina was photographing the architect bodies, preserving their memory. Jisoo was monitoring communications, watching as the galaxy fell silent around them. "General Shin wants to build weapons," Yuna said. "He wants to use the architect technology to fight. And you." Yuna thought about the architects. They had been the most powerful beings in the galaxy. They had weapons that could destroy stars. And they had been erased by a question. "I think weapons are the wrong answer," she said. "The architects tried to fight. They tried to prove themselves through power. It did not work. Then what do you suggest?" The silence asked a question. "Maybe we should try to answer it." President Kwan smiled sadly. "And what answer would we give?" Before Yuna could respond, the station shook. Alarms screamed through every corridor. The remnant's light flared bright red. "It is coming," the remnant said. "Faster than I expected. Your species has attracted its attention." Outside the station, the stars began to dim, one by one, like candles being snuffed out. Darkness spread across the sky. Not the darkness of space, but something deeper. Something hungry. "All Concord channels are going dead," Jisoo reported, her voice shaking. "Every species in the galaxy is receiving the same signal. The same ... presence." On 1,000 worlds, trillions of beings looked up at the sky and felt something watching them. On Earth, children stopped playing. On distant colonies, workers put down their tools. On warships and trading vessels, crews fell silent. The silence had arrived. It did not come in ships. It did not come with weapons. It simply was, everywhere at once, filling the spaces between stars, pressing against the edges of minds, and then the question came. It was not spoken in words. It was not a sound or a thought. It was a feeling deeper than language, older than consciousness. Every being in the galaxy felt it at the same moment. Why should you continue? The elder races collapsed under the weight of the question. They had built their civilizations on conquest, on hierarchy, on the suppression of weakness. They had told themselves they were great because they were powerful. Now, facing a power beyond comprehension, they had nothing to say. But humans responded differently. On the architect station, Yuna did not fall. She did not despair. She felt the question pressing against her mind, demanding an answer, and she pushed back. Not with logic. Not with achievements. With memory. She remembered her mother singing to her as a child. She remembered her first heartbreak and the friend who had held her while she cried. She remembered every small kindness, every act of love, every moment of connection that had made her life worth living. Around her, her crew did the same. Taiho remembered his father teaching him to read. Mina remembered the first fossil she had ever found and the wonder she had felt. Jisoo remembered dancing at her sister's wedding, across Earth, across the colonies, across every human ship and station. People remembered, not their achievements, not their power, their lives, their loves, their hopes and fears and dreams, and somewhere in the darkness. The silence paused. It had asked this question countless times across billions of years. Species had answered with pride, with power, with lists of accomplishments. Humanity answered with something it had never encountered before: honest vulnerability. The silence did not retreat. It did not approve. But for the first time in 80,000 years, it hesitated. "It is listening," the remnant said, its voice filled with something that might have been wonder. "Your species is the first to make it listen." Yuna looked at her crew. They were scared. They were small. They were facing something beyond understanding, but they were still standing. "If it is listening," she said, "then we need to give it something worth hearing." She turned to Jisoo. "Open a channel. Every frequency, every language, every ship and station and colony. I want the whole galaxy to hear what we have to say." Jisoo's hands trembled as she worked the console. "Channel open, Captain." Juna took a deep breath. The darkness pressed against her mind. The question demanded an answer, and humanity prepared to speak. The galaxy held its breath. On a million worlds, beings of every shape and species stood frozen under skies that had gone dark. The silence pressed against every mind, patient and eternal, waiting for an answer to its terrible question. On the Architect Station, Yuna stood before a console that could broadcast to every corner of the galaxy. Jisoo had connected them to every human ship, every colony, every listening post. The Concord's communication networks, abandoned by fleeing elder races, had automatically linked to the signal. Whatever humanity said now, everyone would hear. Captain Taiho said quietly, "What are you going to tell it?" Yuna had been thinking about this since the silence arrived. She had prepared speeches in her head, logical arguments about human potential, lists of their achievements and their hopes for the future. But now, facing the infinite darkness, all of those words felt hollow. "I do not know," she admitted. The remnant drifted closer. The architects spent 3 days crafting their response. They brought together their greatest minds, their most eloquent speakers. They created a perfect argument for their existence. Its light flickered. It was not enough. Then what would be enough? Mina asked. "I do not know. I am only a memory of a dead people. But I know this. The architects spoke from their minds. Perhaps you should speak from somewhere else." Yuna looked at her crew. They were not the greatest minds of humanity. They were not leaders or heroes. They were ordinary people, far from home, afraid and confused and small. They were exactly like billions of other humans across the stars. And maybe that was the point. Jisoo, Yuna said. "I want you to broadcast something for me." "What?" "Everything. Not speeches. Not arguments. Our music. Our stories. Our art. The sounds of our lives." She turned to face her crew. "The silence wants to know why we should continue. I cannot explain it with words, but maybe I can show it." Jisoo worked the console with steady hands. She connected to Earth's cultural archives, to colony databases, to personal collections stored on ships throughout human space. She gathered recordings, broadcasts, files that humans had created simply because they wanted to. A child's laughter echoed across the channel first. Then a lullaby, sung by a mother to her baby on a distant colony world. Then music, not the grand symphonies of human civilization, but simple songs. a worker humming while she repaired a broken machine, friends singing together at a celebration, an old man playing an instrument he had carved himself, alone on a ship at the edge of explored space. The silence listened. More sounds came. Love letters read aloud. Wedding vows. Eulogies that ended in laughter because the dead would have wanted it that way. Jokes told between strangers. Arguments that ended in hugs. The sound of rain on rooftops. The cry of a newborn baby. The quiet breathing of someone sleeping next to the person they loved. Images followed the sounds. Paintings made by children who did not know they could not become artists. Photographs of ordinary moments. Families eating together, friends walking on beaches, old couples holding hands. Stories written by people who would never be famous. About characters who were not heroes, who struggled and failed and tried again. Taiho stepped forward. He had found a microphone somewhere and he spoke into it, his voice joining the broadcast. "We do not know if we deserve to continue," he said. "We have done terrible things. We have hurt each other. We have made mistakes that cost millions of lives. We have been cruel, selfish, and blind." His voice cracked, but he kept going. "But we have also loved. We have held each other when we were afraid. We have created beauty for no reason except that it made us happy. We have looked up at the stars and felt wonder, even when we knew how small we were. We have kept trying, even when we failed. We have kept hoping, even when there was no reason to hope." He wiped his eyes. "Maybe that is not enough. Maybe we are not worthy of continuing. But it is the truth. It is who we are, and we cannot be anything else." As the broadcast continued. Across the galaxy, humans added their voices. A scientist on Mars read a poem she had written for her daughter. A pilot sang the song his grandfather had taught him. A child drew a picture and held it up to a camera, showing the silence, a stick-figure family standing under a yellow sun. The elder races watched in silence. They had never seen anything like this. They had built empires on power and logic, on conquest and achievement. They had forgotten what it meant to simply be alive, to feel, to love without reason. The silence listened to it all. Hours passed. Days. The darkness remained, pressing against the edges of reality, but it did not advance. It did not consume. It simply waited, absorbing every sound, every image, every moment of raw human experience. And then, for the first time in 80,000 years, it responded. The response was not words. It was not a judgment. It was a single feeling, pressed into the mind of every human in the galaxy at the same moment. Interesting. The darkness shifted. Not retreating, but settling, like a predator that had decided to watch rather than strike. The stars began to brighten again, slowly returning to their normal light. "What is happening?" Jisoo asked. The remnant's form had changed. Its light was softer now, almost warm. "The silence has not accepted you," it said. "But it has not rejected you either. For the first time since the architects died, it is curious. It wants to see what you will become." Yuna felt the weight on her mind lighten. The question was still there, always present, but it no longer demanded an immediate answer. It was waiting. "Is that good?" Mina asked. "It is unprecedented," the remnant said. "The silence has tested thousands of species across billions of years. It has found all of them lacking. But you did not try to prove yourselves worthy. You simply showed it what you are." Yuna looked out at the stars. They were beautiful again, bright points of light against the endless dark. "The test is not over," she said. It was not a question. "No," the remnant agreed. "It will never be over. The silence will watch. It will wait. And one day, it will ask again. The answer you give then will determine everything." Yuna nodded slowly. She understood. Humanity had not won. They had simply earned the chance to keep trying. For now, that was enough. "Then we had better make sure we have a good answer," she said. Behind her, her crew began to smile. The fear was still there. But so was something else. Hope. Purpose. The stubborn human. Refusal to surrender to the darkness. The silence had come to end them. Instead, it had given them something to live for. Yuna turned back to the console. "This is Captain Kim to all human vessels. The crisis is not over, but we have bought ourselves time. Return to your duties. Live your lives. Love each other." She paused, searching for the right words. "And remember, we are being watched. Not by enemies. By something that wants to know if we are worth saving. So let us show it. Every day. In every choice we make." She closed the channel. The darkness remained at the edge of existence, patient and eternal, and humanity faced it without fear. 1 year had passed since the silence came, and the galaxy was no longer the same. Yuna stood on the bridge of her new ship. The horizon's dawn, watching the stars through the viewport. The vessel was twice the size of her old command, built with a mix of human technology and architect designs. Its crew was different too. Humans worked alongside aliens from a dozen species, beings who had once looked down on humanity as children. Now they looked to humans for guidance. The galactic concord had shattered in the months after the silence's visitation. Some elder races had fled to the far edges of the galaxy, hiding from a test they knew they could not pass. Others had turned inward, their ancient civilizations crumbling under the weight of questions they had never learned to ask. But a few had done something unexpected. They had reached out to humanity. Envoy Rothel had been the first. His crystalline form appeared on Yuna's viewscreen 3 weeks after the crisis, his colors soft and uncertain. "Captain Kim," he had said, "I have served the Concord for 4,000 years. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have watched species destroy themselves and others. But I have never seen what you did." "What did we do?" Yuna had asked. It answered with truth. Not the truth of achievements or power. The truth of the heart. His crystal shifted to a color she had never seen before. "My people have forgotten how to feel that truth. We have been alive so long that we have become hollow. But watching your species, hearing your songs and stories and laughter..." He paused. "You reminded us of something we lost long ago." He had asked to join her crew. He was not the only one. Now the Horizon's dawn carried representatives from 20 species, all of them searching for something they had lost. Some called it hope. Others called it purpose. Yuna called it being alive. On Earth, President Kwan addressed the United Council. The chamber was fuller than it had ever been, packed with delegates from human colonies and alien civilizations alike. "1 year ago, we faced extinction," she said. "Not from weapons or war, but from a question we could not answer. The silence asked us why we should continue, and we responded the only way we knew how. With honesty, with vulnerability, with the truth of who we are." She looked out at the assembled delegates. "That response saved us. But it did more than that. It changed the galaxy. Species that had never spoken to each other are now building bridges. Civilizations that had forgotten how to feel are learning again. And humanity, once considered the youngest and weakest of the starfaring races, is now leading the way into a new era." She paused, her expression serious. "But we must not forget, the silence is still watching. It has not accepted us. It has not rejected us. It is waiting, curious to see what we will become. Our answer bought us time, nothing more. What we do with that time will determine everything." Far from Earth, on the architect station now called Hope's Threshold, Dr. Taiho Park worked in a laboratory filled with alien scholars. They came from across the galaxy to study the architects, to learn from their triumphs and failures. Taiho led them, his once awkward manner transformed by purpose. "The architects made a mistake," he told his students. "A mix of humans and aliens gathered around ancient consoles. They tried to answer the silence with logic. They listed their achievements as if they were presenting a report. But the silence was not asking for a resume. It was asking for something deeper." Young alien raised a tentacle. "What was it asking?" Taiho smiled. "It was asking, who are you really? Not what you have done or what you can do, but what you are at your core. What makes you worthy of existing, not in terms of usefulness, but in terms of being." He gestured to the walls around them, covered in architect inscriptions. The architects forgot how to answer that question. They became so focused on building things that they forgot to be things. They created life across the galaxy, but they lost touch with what made life worth living. Ice. He looked at his students. That is why we are here. Not just to study the past, but to make sure we do not repeat it. Across the galaxy, Lieutenant Jisoo Han's broadcast had become legendary. Copies spread from world to world, ship to ship. Alien children grew up listening to human lullabies. Ancient species, billions of years old, wept at the sound of human laughter. The broadcast had become more than a message. It had become a reminder of what life could be. Jisoo herself had returned to Earth, to her family, to a quiet life far from the stars. But people still recognized her. They stopped her on streets and in markets, thanking her for something she barely understood. I just pushed a button, she told her sister one evening. Her sister shook her head. You gave the galaxy a voice. You showed them what we sound like when we are being honest. That matters more than you know. Dr. Mina Beek had remained on Hope's threshold, leading excavations deeper into the station. Every week brought new discoveries, architect technology that could reshape worlds, star maps showing every planet they had ever seeded with life. The maps revealed something extraordinary. Humanity had millions of cousin species scattered across the galaxy, all descendants of architect experiments. Some had developed intelligence. Most had not. But all of them were connected, branches of the same ancient tree. We are not alone, Mina announced to a gathered assembly. We never were. The architects created a family across the stars, and we are part of it. Our job now is to find our siblings and bring them into the light. On the horizon's dawn, Una received word that the expedition was ready. Their mission was unlike any that had come before. They would travel beyond the galaxy's edge, toward the direction the silence had come from. Not to fight, not to conquer, to explore, to learn. To show the silence that humanity's answer was not just words, Envoy Rothel stood beside her on the bridge. His crystalline form had changed over the past year, becoming warmer, more vibrant. Being around humans had affected him in ways he did not fully understand. Are you afraid? He asked. Una considered the question. Beyond the viewport, the stars of the galaxy spread out like a field of diamonds. Beyond them lay the unknown, the space between galaxies, the realm from which the silence had come. Yes, she admitted. But fear is not the same as surrender. Humans have always been afraid. We were afraid when we left our caves. We were afraid when we crossed our oceans. We were afraid when we reached for the stars. But we went anyway. She looked at her crew, the humans and aliens who had chosen to follow her into the unknown. The silence asked why we should continue. I think the answer is not something we say. It is something we do. We continue because we choose to. Because we believe tomorrow can be better than today. Because we are curious and stubborn and filled with a hope that makes no logical sense. She smiled. That is the human answer, and I think it is a good one. The horizon's dawn turned toward the edge of the galaxy. Behind them, trillions of beings watched, human and alien alike. United for the first time in history, the silence remained at the edge of existence, patient and eternal. But it was no longer alone in its watching. Humanity was watching back, reaching out across the endless dark. Refusing to be afraid, Captain Unikim gave the order. Take us forward. And the ship leaped toward the unknown. Carrying the hopes of a galaxy on its shoulders, the journey was only beginning.